What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtonette. In this episode, I'm going to be running over the Week 12 action. It was a big week for the Georgia Bulldogs. Outside of that, not a whole lot went down, but I will be talking a lot in this video about the Big 12. Before I get into it, if you go on to enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. Starting things out, though, talking about the Georgia game. They outscored Tennessee 31-7 after a slow start, going down 10-0. It's a big win, obviously, for these Bulldogs, for their college football playoff hopes. A team that was the first team out of the last rankings is likely going to swap places with Tennessee, I would say. I think Tennessee probably slips behind Boise State after this one. It was a return to form for Carson Beck. He was 25 for 40. 347 yards and 2 touchdowns. And obviously, when you hold an opponent to just 7 points, it means your defense is doing a good job as well. So the Bulldogs defense completely shut down the Volunteers offense in the second half, holding them scoreless, and did a good job really after kind of a slow start in the first quarter. So it was a big game. Tennessee is not out of the college football playoff picture with that. The SEC is still wide open. This is only their second loss in conference. There's a scenario actually that I think is still in play. It might not be anymore, actually. I think it's down to 7 teams because of LSU's loss to Florida. But it's now a possibility that there could be, and I think actually South Carolina's win over Mizzou also takes away a 7-team tie. But there is still a potential, I believe, for a 6-team tie atop the SEC standings. So again, there's still, Tennessee is still in that running, and the fact they only have 2 losses and that everybody outside of Texas and Texas A&M also have 2 losses means that there are teams that are still in play. But Tennessee overall with 2 losses, regardless of if they're still in the SEC race, is very much in the college football playoff picture. Elsewhere, BYU, who was number 6 in the rankings, was stunned at home. I think then they were obviously the number 3 seeded team. They were stunned at home by Kansas. The offense was held to just 13 points. They had 2 turnovers. They actually outgained the Jayhawks by, I think, somewhere close to like 75 to 100 yards, 354 yards of total offense, but they just couldn't get in the end zone, and the turnovers obviously were a big problem for the Cougars as well. I think after this loss, they're going to be fringe top 12 ranking. I think the committee probably puts a 1-loss BYU behind a 2-loss Tennessee. I could very much see Tennessee possibly being the first team out or the last team in, and then BYU being right behind them there. Elsewhere in the Big 12, Kenny Dillingham and Arizona State gets a big win over Kansas State in Manhattan. The Sun Devils are now up to 5-2 in conference. They're playing exceptionally well. They're currently trending upward, and on that point, their next game is going to be at home against BYU this coming Saturday, November 23rd. Meanwhile, BYU has been trending down. Obviously, the close game at Utah and then the loss this week to Kansas. Although Kansas has proven that they are dangerous for the top teams in the Big 12, even though they've had overall a poor season. The Big 12 championship game is within reach. Again, it entirely hinges on this week's game against BYU. If they win that, they would then be tied with the Cougars in Big 12 record and obviously would win that tiebreaker with the head-to-head. And the only other team that's ahead of them right now is Colorado. More about Colorado in just a second here, but talking about these Sun Devils quickly, they would then also be tied with Iowa State, who bounced back this past week with a win over Cincinnati. So coming down to those teams, I'm not sure about the tiebreakers. I'll look into that and see if I could put something in this video. If not, maybe I'll go into that when I'm previewing next week's action. But that is going to be a big game to watch, Arizona State at home against BYU. What have these Sun Devils been doing well, though? I want to give some of their standout players an opportunity here to get some recognition. Sam Leavitt has 17 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. He's been really clean with the ball. And then running back Cam Scatterboo is really a dual option here, a dual threat. He has over 1,000 rushing yards, 11 touchdowns, and he also has 448 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns there. And then Jordan Tyson is their leading receiver, and he has over 800 receiving yards and has had a phenomenal season. The defense has done well also. You know, they limited the Wildcats offense to just 14 points this past week, and they, again, are playing really well right now. Another team in the same conference, just mentioned them, Colorado. They get a dominant win, and they are really in the conference driver's seat right now. After a 49 to 24 beatdown of Utah, Travis Hunter again made big plays on both sides of the ball, and this Buffalo's team is rolling. They are a team that I don't think many other teams in college football would want to run into right now. And boy, if it came down to Arizona State, the team that was picked last to finish in the Big 12 Conference, against Colorado in the Big 12 championship game, that would be some story. So that is certainly a possibility, and I honestly hope that does happen. I mean, BYU would be cool too. They weren't expected to finish near the top of the conference. So, I mean, what a year for the Big 12, for college football, for fans, especially neutral fans or fans of Arizona State and Colorado, and even BYU after this loss, and Iowa State as well. They're still in the picture. But a great season, especially when going into it. It looked like it would be Kansas State, Utah, Oklahoma State, and even Kansas, but really these teams, and maybe even in Arizona, but these teams have stepped up, and so that's a cool story out of the Big 12. Couple of other notes from this week. Oregon survives at Wisconsin with a 16-13 win. They were down 13-6 going into the fourth quarter when Jump Around was played at Camp Randall Stadium, and then the Ducks came flying back with a 10-0 push to finish the game. Not their best game for Oregon. They get their first bye week. Joel Klatt mentioned it in his weekly rundown that they have not had a bye week in, I think, 8 weeks, or at least maybe even longer than that, but they've played 8 straight weeks in Big Ten conference play. So they finally get a bye week, then they get Washington, and they are still, because of their head-to-head advantage over Ohio State, in the driver's seat, because obviously the only teams that are in contention still, I guess Penn State would technically be, because their losses to Ohio State, but it's probably going to come down to this game we have this coming week, Ohio State hosting Indiana, for the team that will meet the Ducks in the Big Ten championship game. Also, taking a quick look at the ACC, SMU stays undefeated there. They improved to 6-0 in the conference, and they have an opportunity also to potentially slide ahead of Tennessee in the rankings. That'll be something I'll break down more when I go over this week's rankings unveiled Tuesday night. But that's a big win, continuing to win for the Mustangs. They have a pretty manageable slate to finish the season here in their final 2 games. And then also, Clemson finishes ACC play at 7-1 because they obviously finish against South Carolina. I was thinking of Georgia playing Georgia Tech. So Clemson is 7-1. Miami still has 2 games left to play in conference, and because of the Louisville common opponent, will probably tie break there. So Miami would have to lose, but Clemson has done what they needed to do outside of that Louisville game to put them in contention for the ACC title game. But up next, quickly looking ahead to the next week, again, just mentioned the college football playoff rankings are coming out. I don't expect much change there outside of Georgia and Tennessee kind of swapping places. And then this coming week, Indiana at Ohio State, that's a top 5 matchup. College game day is going to be there that with huge stakes. Again, the winner of that game most likely is going to the Big Ten championship game. And then Army, Notre Dame as well. Army is probably going to need Boise State to lose, but if they can pull an upset of the Fighting Irish, that would be huge for the Black Knights to get into the college football playoff picture seriously. So I'll take a closer look at those games along with Arizona State, BYU in my Week 13 preview. But that's all for this episode of College Football Talk with Peter Burtnett. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. I'm signing out. Peace.